Welcome to Asian Review. I'm your host, Bill Sharp. Our show today, implications of Taiwan's presidential and legislative elections. And joining us from his home in Northern Virginia is Dr. Richard Bush. Dr. Bush is Senior Fellow at the Brookings Institution in Washington, D.C., where he also is the Director of the East Asia Policy Studies Program. In addition, he is the holder of the Chun Fu and Cecilia Yan Ku Chair in Taiwan Studies. Previously in his career, he was both the chairperson and managing director of the American Institute in Taiwan. He is a preeminent, highly respected voice on Taiwan affairs, and we're extremely glad to have him with us here today, just a few days before the all-important Taiwan presidential and legislative elections. Welcome to Asian Review. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be with you.
Great. Well, less than a week to this election that everybody has been looking forward to for some time. What's your prediction?
Well, you're right. It's just a few days. The voting will start Saturday morning Taipei time, which is 5 in the evening Friday East Coast time. We have two elections actually: the presidential election and the legislative election that covers all the seats in Taiwan's legislative yuan. It's much easier to make a prediction for the presidential election than it is for the legislative ones. In the presidential race, the candidate of the DPP, Dr. Tsai Ing-wen, has had a comfortable lead for months. And that lead has narrowed a little bit, but it's still substantial. She's run a careful campaign, and so barring some major mistake by her in the next 3.5 days, which I sincerely doubt, I think she will coast to victory. The legislative elections are harder to call because it's 78 different races in geographic districts all over.
Are we okay here?
Surprised.
Okay.
Somewhat more likely.
We got you back.
Somewhat more likely, perhaps. Okay. Somewhat more likely, perhaps, is the DPP a strong plurality of the seats, and then parties that are allied ideologically with the DPP, the Taiwan Solidarity Union and the New People's Party, would make up the rest and give these three parties together an absolute majority. Then they would have to work out some sort of coalition government or coalition arrangement on the policy program that they want to implement.
Well, as you said, Tsai has been enjoying a considerable lead in the polls for some time now. What would you say? What would you say are her strengths? And I guess it would be fair to say, what would you suggest are her weaknesses?
First of all, she's a very engaging person. She's not charismatic the way some of Taiwan's more charismatic politicians are, but that seems to be okay. This is not an election about flash, it's more about substance. She is also extremely smart. She's one of the smartest people on Taiwan, not to denigrate her opponents. She has had a lot of experience in government, first as a trade negotiator. She was deeply involved in Taiwan's accession to the World Trade Organization. She served as President Chen Shui-bian's chairperson of Mainland Affairs from 2000 to 2004. And then she was a legislator for a while, and then she was vice premier of the executive yuan. So she's been around the block. She has a lot of competence. Her other achievement is that she rebuilt the Democratic Progressive Party after it lost two elections in a row, and the party faithful were kind of depressed. She spent the last 4 years rebuilding the organization and giving a sense of purpose and enthusiasm to the supporters of the party.
How about her weaknesses? Everybody's got at least one of those. What would you say is hers?
She has a tendency to keep her cards fairly close to her chest, that she doesn't reveal what she's going to do until she has to. Now, that's not unusual in politicians. What it means in this context is that she has been somewhat vague and sometimes contradictory about her policy approaches. On cross-strait relations with China, she says, I'm going to preserve the status quo. Well, she doesn't get to decide to define what the status quo is. China has its own definition. We have a definition as well. And so this has left a great deal of uncertainty and fear on the part of China as to where she would go. She comes with a reputation in China. The consensus opinion believes that she is firmly dedicated to a total independent status for Taiwan, which would be a challenge to China's fundamental interests. On domestic policies, too, there are also questions. She says that she will solve Taiwan's energy supply program, and but the party also has a strong anti-nuclear strain.
Right.
How she's going to reconcile those two is not something that's clear, and at least some people in Taiwan are not confident that she'll be able to pull it off.
Well, now, you've known lots of leaders in Taiwan and had the opportunity to really speak to them, in great detail. What do you see as her definition of status quo?
It means the existing relationship with China, an array of economic interactions, the ones that have been developed under President Ma Ying-jeou. She wants restraint from China in the security sphere. She wants China to respect Taiwan's international space as it exists, and not challenge that. China says that if that status quo is to continue, she is going to have to reassure it as to her intentions about Taiwan's political status. And this involves, from Beijing's point of view, first and foremost, acceptance of an esoteric thing called the 1992 consensus.
Esoteric, that's a great way to put it. That's a really great way to put it. Yeah.
It's a term theological, but that might offend somebody. So
I've never heard it called esoteric before, but I think that's a really good description. Okay, well, do you see her as a person that wants to pursue independence?
I don't know what she wants in her heart of hearts. I think that she is quite pragmatic. And
that's my take, too.
She wants to establish her party, the Democratic Progressive Party, as the dominant party in Taiwan, and to guarantee DPP control of the legislature, ensure that for most presidential elections, the person who wins will be somebody from the DPP, similar to what we had under President Roosevelt, for example. long period of Democratic dominance.
Right.
And in order to do this, she has to, I think, shift the balance of sentiment in Taiwan concerning China in a more DPP direction. And that may be what this election reflects, that shift is going on. We'll have to wait and see. But in order to do that, and in order to consistently win elections, she's going to have to perform well. She's going to have to satisfy the Taiwan public that she's a good manager of the economy, she's a good manager of the relationship with China, and that she's a good manager of the relationship with the United States. That's a delicate act that she has to perform, and she is not going to do so by being ideological. I think China is wrong in its fears, but they don't listen to me, and they're going to have to do something to some extent about their own fears if we're going to get through this without problems or tensions.
You know, it strikes me as an interesting fact that Tsai Ing-wen worked for the KMT when Lee Teng-hui was in power, and she's worked for Chen Shui-bian, so she's quite familiar with both the blue and the green. I wonder if she's a person that can create a certain degree of, I'll call it turquoisization in Taiwan politics.
Well, it's a good term. One might also think of aqua.
Aqua, okay.
Or teal. The possibilities are endless. I would say that when she worked for Lee Teng-hui was already shifting in the direction of turquoise. He came out of a blue background, and nominally his KMT administration was a blue administration, but he was pursuing some objectives that, at least from China's point of view, seem to be green goals. And the result was that when Lee Teng-hui left office and Chen Shui-bian took over, Lee Teng-hui was actually more sympathetic to what Chen was trying to do, and he formed his own party called the Taiwan Solidarity Union,
Right.
which is an independence party, and it is further to the left or in the independence direction than the DPP is. And it's one of those parties that might get a few seats in the legislature and be a coalition partner with the DPP and restrain any moves that it might contemplate towards the center.
Interesting. We'll take a break here. You're watching Asia in Review. My guest today is Dr. Richard Bush of the Brookings Institution in Washington, D.C. We're discussing the upcoming, very, very interesting presidential and legislative elections in Taiwan, which will take place this Saturday. And we'll be right back.
Okay, this is Think Tech Hawaii, and it's Wednesday. Every Wednesday is Energy Wednesday here in Hawaii, the state of clean energy. 4 to 5 p.m. every Wednesday. Come and listen to us. And just to show you what I mean, I'm going to ask Sharon to tell us more.
Come and see us every Wednesday, as Jay said. And we have people like Jim Albers from HECO here and co-host Ray Starling here every Wednesday. We not only go on Olelo and OC16, but also stream live. So please come visit us, hear about the latest in clean energy.
Okay, Jim, you've been here. You got any comment on all this?
As important as energy is in all of our lives today, this is a great forum and a great format to vet those issues. So I encourage everybody to listen in and participate.
Okay, Ray, what do you think for a close?
Well, I think this is the greatest show in the energy world here in Hawaii. You can come here every week, 1 hour, and catch the latest on what's happening and hear from the people who really know what's going on, like Jim Alberts. We appreciate your coming today.
Thank you.
Ray Starling, Sharon Moriwaki, Jim Alberts, and Jay Fidel here in Hawaii, the state of clean energy. 4 to 5 p.m. Wednesday. Aloha.
Aloha.
Welcome back to Asia in Review. I'm your host, Bill Sharp. My guest today is Dr. Richard Bush, who's joining us via Skype from his home in Northern Virginia. Before the break, we were talking about Tsai Ing-wen, who seems to be on the road to success in the presidential election. We probably should talk about her opponent, Eric Chu, who's also the chairman of the Nationalist Party, the Kuomintang, the KMT, and also is the mayor of Xinbei, although he's on a leave of absence. Julie Lun, Eric Chu, what would you say his strengths and weaknesses are?
Well, his strengths are, first of all, that he's a turquoise kind of guy in terms of his ethnic background. His father is a mainlander, that is, came over to Taiwan with Chiang Kai-shek's nationalist forces in 1949. His mother comes from a prominent native Taiwanese family, the Gao family, which has a long political pedigree in Taiwan. And so he, in a way, crosses the divide between blue and green and provides a bridge within the Kuomintang for its mainlander and Taiwanese sides.
It was interesting to me watching, coverage of the election on Chinese TV, which I have Chinese TV at my home.
Yes.
That when he was campaigning in Taiwanese, something a lot of Kuomintang members just can't do.
No, that's right. Well, that was literally his mother's tongue.
Mm-hmm.
So he's bilingual, I'm sure. He also speaks excellent English. He did a session at Brookings for a group of us scholars, and he answered our questions for 2.5 hours, always had an answer, and spoke very good English. He was educated in the United States. And so he does well with both mainlander and Taiwanese audiences. Another strength is, aside from being very well educated, is that he has a lot of political experience in local politics. As you said, he's the mayor of Xinbei city in northern Taiwan. It kind of loops around the capital city of Taipei. That happens to be the most heterogeneous jurisdiction in Taiwan, because a lot of people from the south who migrated north to work went to Xinbei instead of Taipei. And so he has to appeal.
Okay, we're
a
having
constituency
a little, there we
go.
We're back on the air. We had a little technical break there.
We okay? Shall I go on?
Yeah, we got you back.
Okay. Well, in running for mayor of Xinbei, he has to appeal to an electorate that looks very much like Taiwan as a whole.
That's very interesting.
Yeah. No. And he did very well the first time. He had a bit of a squeaker this last time for factors that were somewhat out of his control. But he sort of knows very well what's on the minds of Taiwanese all over the island and what their everyday concerns are. I think Tsai Ing-wen has learned a good deal about what those concerns are, but she's always worked in Taipei, in the capital city.
Would it be fair to say, if we compare the two campaigns, Tsai's campaign and Eric Chu's campaign, that Tsai's campaign is essentially very focused on what we might call domestic politics, rebuilding Taiwan's economy that she sees as being hollowed out, addressing things that deal with like the price of real estate, the price of housing, creating opportunities for younger generation. Whereas Eric Chu's campaign is maintenance of cross-strait relations, carry on where Ma left off. Would that be fair?
Well, not quite. I mean, I think
okay.
Eric Chu understands very clearly what all the domestic issues are and the challenges that those issues pose. I mentioned the problems with energy. There's also problem with pension. There's a
right.
deeper problem of the demographic shift in Taiwan in the same sort of way that Japan is suffering. If he were on your show, I think he would argue that
We'll have to get him.
You can only address those problems, those domestic problems, if you manage cross-strait relations well. And he would argue Tsai Ing-wen appears to be unwilling to do what it takes to sustain current cross-strait relations, which sooner or later will impede her ability to handle all the domestic issues that she correctly says she wants to address.
How would you compare Eric Chu with the current president, Ma Ying-jeou?
Ma Ying-jeou started as a scholar. He's focused on policy. He's very dedicated to his job. But the rap on him is that he's not that good a politician. Some would say he's not a good politician at all. He has not done well in communicating what he's doing and why he's doing all the time. He's more comfortable in the Capitol than he is sort of outside the Capitol. In many respects, there appears to be a lot of similarities between Ma Ying-jeou and our current president.
I agree with you. I wonder if it was that Harvard Law School training.
Well,
Not to be sarcastic, but I do wonder about that.
I think there's something in one's basic personality that is at work here. You know, I could never be a politician in the way that Tsai Ing-wen has become. Frankly, she worked very much in the policy realm for a long time, and she learned to be a politician, and she's done very well. Lee Teng-hui started as a bureaucrat, and he became a politician. James Sung, the same thing. Eric, his career has been, you know, first of all, as a politician, getting elected at the local level, and then doing the work of government. So all these people have been able to, the candidates in the current election have in some way learned to be both politicians and officials.
One interesting comment that I heard about Ma was from a couple of people that served in the legislature, the Li Faiyuan, is he really doesn't understand how that body works.
Well, that could be, or doesn't understand what one has to do in terms of schmoozing legislators, giving respect to legislators in order to get your agenda through. You know, for Ma and for President Obama, I think they believe that, you know, if you explain the detailed rationale for doing this versus that, people should just accept it. And I think, you know, this is a special skill. I think President Ma would also say correctly that the legislature is a fairly dysfunctional organization. That, you know, even if you come up with a good policy, even if you do the political work, you're not necessarily going to get your bills passed.
Let's take a minute here and talk about James Sung. I mean, I don't think anybody predicts he's going to win, but, you know, it seems to me you could make the argument that he is perhaps the most qualified of all the three candidates. Why is he running? What's your take on him?
The main reason he's running is not to win the presidency, but to ensure a place in the legislature for his party.
Right.
And his party needs to get a small number of seats in order to form a caucus. And it's forming a caucus that gives a party an influential role in the work of the legislature and the work of government. And that's due to some complicated details about how the legislature works. But it appears that he believes that his greatest influence in Taiwan comes from having that caucus and then working behind the scenes to shape legislation and bargain for himself and his people in the process of doing legislative work.
You know, as I read his things that he says at different campaign rallies and all, he consistently talks about bringing the blue and green together, this idea of turquoisization.
Mm-hmm.
And he would seem to be a person that, given his political skills, was, although he's probably more clearly associated with the blue, would perhaps have that ability.
One would think so. But, you know, if you ask people in the DPP about him,
Mm-hmm.
and they would be the green forces he would, you know, have to engage and bring on board,
Right.
They will remind you that there was a time back in the 1980s when James Sung had sort of an important role implementing repression.
Okay.
They suffered under him.
Right.
You know, he's grown since then. That was a long time ago. But he has his own baggage.
Right.
And I think that for someone of his age to be running in what is now a very young society
Mm-hmm.
is sort of probably not going to work. There may be registered voters today who were as old as his grandchildren.
Right. Well, I noted in your working paper implications of the 2016 elections. You mentioned Nathan Bato, who's at the Institute of Political Science at Academia Sinica. And I had heard this view before, actually, from him, but I thought it was very interesting that there's a very good chance that Tsai can win a legislative majority if she achieves, I forget the exact statistic of, was it 46 to 50% of the popular vote in each of the, or a majority of the legislative districts.
Yeah.
He seems to be pretty upbeat that she's going to get a majority. What do you think about that?
Well, I think Nathan is making an effort with uncertain data and a certain methodology to predict what's going to happen. And he's, I think, working harder than just about anybody to make those sorts of predictions. I agree with his basic point, and what he's essentially saying, if the DPP and Tsai Ing-wen can turn the legislative contest into a national election instead of 78 district elections, and then the DPP may well win a majority. If each district remains a race unto itself with very local factors influencing the outcome, then maybe not. But we'll see. You know, we'll know on Saturday morning
Right.
what the result is.
We're going to take another break here. You're watching Asia in Review. I'm your host, Bill Sharp. Our guest today is Dr. Richard Bush, joining us via Skype from his home in Northern Virginia. We'll be right back. Don't go away. We've got a lot of things still to talk about.
Hi, my name's Hillary Weinberg. I'm the host of The Whole Gamut on Think Tech Hawaii. See us live every Tuesday at 1 p.m. or on our YouTube channel to hear us talk about world affairs from Hawaii and beyond. See you then.
Aloha! Hello, my name is Patrick Bratton. I'm host of Global Connections here at ThinkTech Hawaii. We broadcast live every Thursday at 1 p.m. We bring Hawaii to the world and the world to Hawaii, talking about international events and various things of interest to the audience. Please join me. I look forward to talking with you and having you get to meet some of my guests. Aloha.
Aloha, my name is Kaui Lucas. I am the host of Hawaii is My Mainland, here every Friday on ThinkTech Hawaii at 3 p.m. I invite people who are doing interesting and inspiring things in our community to help us keep it local and keep it real. Tune in any Friday, 3 p.m. and also available on our YouTube channel and my blog, kauilucas.com. Hawaii is my mainland. Aloha.
Welcome back to Asian Review. I'm your host, Bill Sharp. My guest today is Dr. Richard Bush of the Brookings Institution in Washington, D.C. We've been having a very, very informative discussion about the upcoming election, the presidential and legislative elections, which will take place this January 16th in Taiwan. Okay, let's say that Tsai wins the presidency and the DPP gets a majority in the legislature. That doesn't necessarily guarantee her smooth sailing. It seems to me that with these kinds of coalitions that she's trying to form with young people, the new minor parties, the new power party, etc., that she could have a reasonable amount of trouble, challenge maybe is a better word, in leading them.
Well, I think that's right. If she does, as I expect, have the long-term goal of establishing the DPP as the majority party in Taiwan for a long time to come, she, I think, will have to work out some sort of modus vivendi with China. She will have to address head-on questions like energy, and trade liberalization broadly. And to do that, she may end up alienating some of these deeper green forces that she's currently allied with. This is not a new problem in politics. This is not a new problem in Taiwan politics. It will require some skillful work to keep them on board. And the mainland's reaction will have some impact here, because if, say, the New People's Party or the Taiwan Solidarity Union or civic groups are very unhappy with the way China is treating Tsai Ing-wen, they are liable to urge her to take steps that at least objectively speaking, exacerbates the situation. You could have emerging a spiral between the two sides of the strait. That's not good for her long-term agenda.
Right. There's a couple issues that it seems that the DPP has committed to that strike me as fairly interesting. And I wonder if she gets elected, she gets a majority in the legislature, is she really going to be able to pull these off? One is the DPP is more or less committed itself to a goal the U.S. has long sought, and that is the commitment of 3% of the GDP into the military budget. I just really wonder, even if she wins big time and gets a majority in the legislature, if she's going to be able to pull that off.
Well, this is a very important question, because the demands on the government budget do not free up a lot of money for the military. The military has to compete with other claimants of the government's resources. And I mentioned before the aging population. Well, that means funding things like old age pensions and health care, not a small matter. And we face a similar situation in our own country.
Right.
And, you know, if you raise taxes too much, that undermines economic growth, which is very important for Taiwan.
Right.
You know, Taiwan probably has too many universities, but once you have them, you've got to fund them.
Right.
So there is really what I call a trade-offs between guns on the one hand, sort of military might, wheelchairs on the other, meaning sort of taking care of old people, and then shark's fin soup, you know, having good things like.
That's a really good way to put it. You know, another problem it seems to me that she's going to need to wrestle with, and I notice this has come up in a lot of the KMT campaign talking points, is she's going to get rid of the volunteer system and reinstitute, we'll call it the draft. There'll be compulsory military service of a longer period of time than currently exists for everybody in Taiwan. And of course, she's got a problem here, doesn't she? I mean, this volunteer system that Ma ushered in has not worked very well at all.
I was among the last cohort of young American men who got conscripted into the U.S. Army back in 1970. That was before our old volunteer army was put in place.
Right.
I happen to think that requiring national service of some kind on a universal basis is a good thing.
I would agree with you.
It's one of the builders of citizenship, and particularly in societies that are polarized the way Taiwan is. It's a way to bring blue people and green people together.
I agree. The military is a great mixer. As you say, it brings people together from every conceivable walk of life.
The idea of a volunteer army started under Chen Shui-bian. It was continued under Ma. But the question was, number one, can we afford it? And number two, are there going to be enough people who are really interested in serving in the military when, you know, for talented young people, there are other kinds of employment that are available. Just to come back to the 3%, I've often been allergic to the idea of setting a numerical target of 3% of GDP for defense spending, or you know, wherever you set the figure. Number one, it's very easy for skillful defense bureaucrats to fiddle the figures to get whatever percentage amount you want. Second, what's important is what you're buying with that and what degree of deterrence you are getting for these precious resources. You know, if you spend it all on volunteers and shortchange military equipment, does that raise the costs to Beijing of any kind of military adventure? I'm not so sure it does.
Right.
And it's not just any kind of equipment. It has to be equipment that makes sense for a defense strategy that really does enhance deterrence.
We're winding down here on our time. We have about 4 minutes left. There's a couple other things I'd like to just hit on, perhaps quickly, but that's always seems to be the problem. We always have more to talk about than we have time to talk about them in. Pork. It seems that she wants to make a compromise with the U.S. on pork imports. But of course, she's getting a lot of backlash on that, and the KMT has picked that theme up, using that against her. On the other hand, some people would say that USTR, United States Trade Representative, is just too unyielding. I mean, Taiwan did compromise on beef. Of course, Suu Kyi paid a price for that. But what's your take on this pork issue? Hello? Well, let's go to commercial, and we will be right back. We'll reestablish connections for the last couple minutes of the show.
Hello, everybody. I'm IC Davidson. Thanks for tuning in to Think Tech Hawaii. One of the things that we do here, or the thing that we do here, is promote civic engagement in Hawaii. What does that mean? We want to talk about things that people want to hear about, and we want you to engage us and be part of that conversation. One of the ways that you can do that is by joining in during our live show via Twitter. How do you do that? Well, you get on the interwebs and get Twitter, get an account, and mention us if you have a question. What you'll do is you tune into our show live, tweet us questions, and our hosts and guests will address them accordingly. It's really easy, it's really fun, and I think that your participation in what we're doing here will help us continue the dialogue on very important issues that we're trying to cover. Sustainability, clean energy, you name it, we're on top of it. We want you to be part of what we're doing, because together we'll be able to make things change. Thank you for watching. Think Tech Hawaii, thinktechhawaii.com, weekdays 12 to 5 p.m. That was weird.
Okay, well, we're back now.
It's not enough time. Okay.
Okay, so does the U.S. need to make a compromise on this pork issue with Taiwan?
I think the compromise is to say, we understand this is a sensitive issue and we'll deal with it during the course of negotiations. But the expectation would be is that Taiwan bases its barriers to pork on science and not on essentially politics.
Oh, I see. South China Sea.
Mm-hmm.
Probably should have gotten to this question a little bit earlier, since we're down to just a bit under 2 minutes, so we have to be brief here. There's a school of thought in the DPP that says, at least in 2014 they were saying this, they're saying, well, look, we want to hold on to Itaabu, okay, the biggest island in the South China Sea, which Taiwan has control of. But we are willing to suspend our claim to other islands other than the Pratas or Dongsha. And we want to enter into negotiations with other claimants and work this out on a very mutual basis. And of course, more recently, there's been some backlash to that, and it seems like the DPP has backed off of that position, perhaps because they're concerned that it might annoy China, with whom I believe they do want a better relationship. What's your take on the South China Sea issue relative to the DPP in this campaign and also with the KMT?
I actually expect a certain amount of continuity on this issue, and it's the backing down has already started. Frankly, I think that Tsai is going to have a lot of issues to deal with. She doesn't need to pick another fight on this one.
Well, I would agree with you. One last question, and I have to ask you for just a very, very brief response. The CMA meeting that took place in Singapore, did it achieve anything other than the hotline?
Well, it occurred, and it was historic in that sense. It may affect legislative elections, but the half-life of any news in Taiwan is usually 72 hours. So I'm not sure if people will remember it at this point.
That's interesting. Okay, well, our time is about up. I'd like to thank you very much for joining us today from your home in Northern Virginia. And I'd like to thank you and our audience for watching as a special edition of Asia in Review. And we will see you at a later time in our regular time slot. Thanks for watching.